by the Center for Law and Social Justice at the Faculty of Law Universitas Gadjah Mada. We are so glad to have you here with us today, both to those tuning in person and to our audience online via YouTube Live. Please feel free to get comfortable and say hello in the chat if you are joining us virtually, and we will be starting shortly. Okay, good morning once again. My name is Alfatania Sekar Ismaya, a researcher at the Center for Law and Social Justice at Faculty of Law UGM, and I'm honored to be your moderator for today's session. This morning, we will explore a topic that sits at the intersection of law, justice, and social transformation with the title of Alternative Punishment and Social Justice. And while the conventional criminal justice system around the world, Indonesia included, has largely focused on imprisonment as the main form of punishment, many countries are rethinking this model. One such example is the Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken,
You're right.
Which has gained international recognition for its progressive approach in reducing incarceration and investing in restorative justice, community-based sanction, and rehabilitative programs. Alternative punishment in the Netherlands are not only designed to hold offenders accountable, but also to repair harm, restore relationship, and reduce recidivism. With a strong emphasis on reintegration into society, this stands in contrast with the more punitive and incarceration-heavy models still dominant in many parts of Indonesia, where prison overcrowding and limited access to restorative mechanisms remain key challenges. Today's discussion is a chance for us to reflect about can we imagine a justice system in Indonesia that also heals rather than only punishes. To guide us through this important conversation, we are deeply honored to welcome Mr. Nico Thuyn, Deputy Criminal Judge at the Court of Appeal of Den Bosch, the Netherlands. Judge Thuyn brings first-hand insight from one of the most progressive judicial systems in Europe. He will walk us through our alternative sentencing, how this is implemented in practice, and what legal foundations support it, and how it serves victims, offenders, and society at large. So please join with us today in welcoming Mr. Nico Thuyn. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I may say Nia, which is more, is less complex than your full name, which is very nice. I will address you, watching you, being physically present. I welcome you. Short personal remark from my side. Istri saya dari Indonesia. I speak some words, but let me please talk in English. My wife and I have a holiday period here. We will also travel to Lombok and Bali. And we're now in Jogja, and it's not only an honor, but really a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to have a good assistance here around. I'm a judge still in the Court of Appeal in Den Bosch, but in 3 years I have to retire. There is a special COVID regulation that judges who had to retire at 70, which is now my age, can prolong for 3 years. So I'm still active, and I was very happy to be 4 times in Indonesia recently. I wrote down, maybe you can see it, project Bapas, implementasi in Indonesian of the sanksi alternative. It was a founded project by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands, and we try to help Indonesian colleagues because they don't have so much experience with alternative punishment for the implementation. And it will continue, I hope, but unfortunately our government has decided to cut a lot of expenses, so we have to see about that. Very shortly, and I can refer to the screen, I hope all can see, I am a judge since 1989. I love exchanges like roundtables this, or presentations, or exchanges.
Recording in progress.
Recording in progress. I agree. And I have been active for the EC, the European Commission, the Council of Europe, International Monetary Fund, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And all these activities were for me also very enriching. It is not helping to the other, but it is often exchanging. There are sometimes new laws that are very interesting, so I learn myself. Maybe your program is not tough, but I'm sorry I have to use a presentation of January where the audience had a tough program. It's just to tell you that I will say a few, I hope, comical words. I will tell some jokes in between. You may do the next one, please. Very shortly, for the ones who don't know, the Netherlands is a very small country, 18 million inhabitants. That is not impressive at all for Indonesia, I know. It is the bridge to the judges, because we now have 2,700 judges, and it's a shortage of 800. So there's a lot of overwork for judges. Fortunately, they have staff, 7,500, and also staff for the public prosecutors, who are also too less. And I have a question to you, and it's hard for the online audience to answer now, but maybe I can start with you, being the physically present. How many female judges do you think of these 2,700 judges? Is that 50% or 60% or 40% or less or more? What do you guess?
I would say 40%.
40% female judges. Anyone else?
Maybe less than that?
Less than that? The answer is totally otherwise. It's 60% of female judges. And in future it will be more, because of the judges who have to be trained now, the training judges. There over 80% is female. And as I was at UGM many years ago, I asked the students there during my presentation, why do you think so many female students, graduates become judges? They didn't know the answer, of course. I said, well, the female students are the best. And the male students didn't like it. And the male students didn't like that. We'll do the next one, please. Please let me say that in my experience, and I've seen quite some countries, judicial systems, there is no criminal justice system that is perfect. It is all work made by women and men. There can be mistakes, and there are sometimes also judicial cultures that make it hard to make some changes, modern changes. But it's good to know that in every country there are challenges. It's very important that we speak with each other and that we ask questions and be enriched about comparative law. Next one, please. In the Netherlands we have many problems as well. There is a wrong idea that a prosperous country like we relatively are, that there are no problems, because we do have problems. Like I just said, 800 too less magistrates, but also a prison capacity problem, insufficient due to lack of staff. We cannot get people motivated to be prison staff, not enough. The trials are sometimes very slow, and we have IT deficiencies. But the good thing is, in every country there are also good practices, and we should have an open mind to follow these practices abroad. I think that's the old one. Let me see. Yeah, oh, yeah. And in many countries there is good practice which is important for the discussion theme of today, and these are the non-custodial sanctions, the alternative sanctions, for a growing number of crimes. What we often see is in countries where it starts with petty crimes, because also the society has to get used that there is no imprisonment and there is no fine, but a different sanction. And first it's only for these lighter crimes where the law says, for instance, like in Indonesia, the new law, I will come back to it later, a crime that it has to be punished until 5 years of imprisonment. There it can be possible. So there's a growing number of crimes. Please continue. And shortly I will present to you the international legal framework. We first have the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for Non-Custodial Measures, known as the Tokyo Rules. They are already old. They are adopted in 1990, unanimously, which is important. Next one, please. There are the Beijing Rules of 85, even older, for juvenile justice, minimum rules for the administration of juvenile justice. And then there are UN Bangkok Rules 2010 for gender-specific alternatives to detention. For instance, women with young children do not have to stay in prison, and there can be arrangements that they can be at home but have restraints. If you want to see more in detail these rules, you always see UN, United Nations. You can go to the website penalreform.org, which is a very good website to see about alternative sanctions and social justice. Please. Not in every country there is an alternative sanction possibility, and this is sometimes because of minimum penalties, that the law says you have to impose a minimum imprisonment penalty of 1 year or 3 years. But it can also be because of the judicial culture. And in the Netherlands, the culture is, of course, I cannot speak for all my colleagues, all 2,700, but I know that the huge majority, I would say over 90%, is happy with the alternative sanctions and also with the freedom to impose penalties, because we don't know about minimum penalties like 1 year imprisonment. We only have we only have a general minimum that is 1 day imprisonment or just a few hours of community service. And this is regarded as an asset. It's not self-evident. We have some conservative parties, populist parties, who try to take away the freedom we have as judges to impose a tailor-made sentence. But until now, also with pressure from judges and judges' council, we still have a lot of freedom. Please. Now, my question to you is, what is your idea? Does imprisonment, is it a way to prevent and reduce crime? And I've heard in my country a lot of non-lawyers saying, yes, it's very good because then the criminals are off the street, they are in prison. Of course, undoubtedly, imprisonment has some temporary incapacitating effect. The crimes can only be committed in the prison, which of course leads also to sanctions. But usually there are no crimes in prison, and of course no crimes outside, because the prisoners have to be staying in prison. The problem is that the temporary effect is very short, because in the Netherlands many imprisonment sentences are only for a maximum of 3 months. 74% is of that kind. Please. And then the deterring effect of a prison sentence is small. But the social consequences for a convicted person are often drastic. If they had a job, they will probably lose a job in 3 months not showing up. Often the relations are very much under pressure. They don't want to, often the wife at home doesn't want to admit the husband again or the friend again. And so there are more consequences. You don't get a job easily, so you have to apply for social welfare, which in the Netherlands is quite a good system, but it costs also money. It's for the society, it's not good. And after 3 months, if the prisoner had a problem in behaving in society, the prisoner will be released, but he or she will not be changed because the problem is not gone. So that is maybe if the longer prison sentence is there, let's say for more than half a year, there is some more effect of treatment, but the reality is in prison the treatment is very complicated. It's much easier if persons are free and can attend to probation service units, etc. Thank you. Now, I was talking about 3 months, 6 months, but we of course also have big penalties like 10 years or 20 years or even lifelong in our country, because severe crimes must be punished severely. You cannot murder a person and then say, I want to do a community service sentence. That's not realistic, also in our country. And in serious crime cases like murder or organized crime, we have a lot of problems with organized drug crimes. Then we have to accept that there's only the deep prison sentence that is adequate for this. And some offenders cannot be rehabilitated. That's also because there are offenders who decide on an early age, let's say they are 20 years young, I want to have a life of criminality because I don't want to work in a shop and have a low salary and having problems with my expenses. I choose for a criminal life. And that brings me to a courtroom joke. It's about an English situation of a judge seeing defendant showing again up for the next crime. This was a defendant who was 20 years young, decided to have a criminal life, and he said, well, maybe I get 70 years old, so still 50 years to come, so the next 50 years I want to, maybe I have to stay in prison for 20 years, but I want to have a party life for 30 years, so I choose for criminality. And the joke, you can skip back to the joke, please. Yeah. The joke is about a very special defendant who was not like in 70 years, but he was much older. He was 90 years. 90 years old. And the judge said, no, you again. All these convictions, now you're so old and you commit a crime again. And, well, the defendant didn't say any word because of the advice of his lawyer. Keep quiet. You might be acquitted because the evidence is thin. So the judge said, well, I see this, I see all the evidence, and it was a robbery, people killed and so on. Very, very severe. You are guilty, so I'm going to give you a prison sentence. And for this sentence, with your criminal record, I can only give you a high sentence. I'm going to give you a sentence of 30 years. 30 tahun. The defendant was sitting all the time silent, and then he stood up. He said, no, Your Honor, you can't do that. You can't be serious. I'm 90 years old. I can never serve your sentence. And the judge quietly sat with a smile, well, do as much as you can. It's the next one. But this was a special example, not only because of the age of 90, but also because of the people who cannot be rehabilitated. The majority of convicted persons can be rehabilitated. That is my belief and the belief of many judges in the Netherlands, but also prosecutors. And research shows positive effects of conditional sentences and community service sentences. We'll come back to the more detailed information later on. The most common way in the Netherlands to impose an alternative sanction is a verdict by the judge with suspended sentence and special conditions, and then often in combination with community service sentence. Why is that? Because if you only give a community service sentence, people might think it is not harsh enough. It should be more instead of a prison sentence. And it's also important that there is a combination. You have to pay back to society with the community service, but you also have to change, because it's often, offenders are often having something in their mind which should be changed, emotions, etc. They need a treatment, they are addicts, so there should be done something more than just giving them community service. And these special conditions are advised by the probation service. I'll come back to it later as well. And if a convicted person violates the conditions, the suspended sentence will be executed. So that is a threat. They know if I don't comply, I can get into prison. Examples of these conditions are the supervision by the probation service. It can take years. A treatment, sometimes a lot of energy for the treatment is necessary. Sometimes the first 6-7 weeks inside, getting out of the acute drug problem. Behavioral intentions, especially aggression training. A lot of aggression crimes, we impose special condition behavioral interventions. And then restraining orders, because also victims want that the perpetrator changes and doesn't do something they did before again. So restraining orders regarding victims. You cannot stay for the coming 2 years in that street or even in that village because the victim could see you. Now this is a question to you. I'll deal with it quite shortly. 5 and 90%. It's about, as I was a trainee judge many years ago, a very experienced judge said to me, what do you think? 5% of the society doesn't want to commit any crime. Other 5% they choose for a life of crime. Like I said, partying for many years. And 90% is in between. They could commit a crime, but if they are afraid that the consequences are drastic, they might not do, but they don't have a very hard line on that. Now, who deserves, you think, priority of the criminal justice system? Is it the first group, the second group, or the third group? Is there any one of you who is so courageous to give an answer?
In my opinion, the 90%.
The 90%, and why?
Because that's the majority of the people. That's the first one. And the second one is, it means that they can change. Therefore, the criminal justice system have to think about the sticks and carrots in order to control them, to make them not doing the crimes.
Anyone else? It's a hard question, yeah? Because I was also confronted with it after my legal studies, etc., etc. You are completely right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's often, if people are non-lawyers and speak with each other with a drink, they say, you should punish the 5% who wants to commit crimes, and you should do more about that. But the reality is there are not so many people who choose for that. And you're right, that's very important also for social justice, as you are active in. People can change. This is the 90%. If they get a community service sentence and knowing that the next sentence, if they commit another crime, will be imprisonment, they will really be afraid. They see that they get caught. There are countries who deal with it in a different way. I might come back to that later on about the United States of America, but in the Netherlands and in many other European countries, we're happy about the possibility to impose first a lighter sentence and then change the 90%. Okay, please. Speaking about rehabilitation, you should first think of first offenders. And if you send a first offender into jail, many first offenders are also can be easily influenced. You send them to the University of Crime. I will repeat that because I think it's important to think about it. Prison is the University of Crime. You can learn how to commit the next crime smarter, so you don't get caught. Or you can learn what to say in trial, because you cannot have the conviction, maybe you're acquitted. It's really a wisdom. And especially because the many offenders easily can be influenced, it's important to keep them out of jail as long as possible. Also, for the future of society, it's safer to impose that non-custodial sanction. Thank you. Now, I'll come back to the theme later on, but I first want to say something about the rates of imprisonment. Maybe some of you know about World Prison Brief. It's a very interesting website. And they show of many, many countries, I think it's more than 130 countries now already over the world, what is the rate per 100,000 population orang. In the European Union it's around 100. In the Netherlands it's around 60, 64. And my question is to ask you, wild guess, don't be afraid, because I missed it myself as well. But what do you think in US of A? Is it 64? Is it 100? Is it less than that? Is it more than that? Anyone? Be courageous.
Maybe more than that.
Maybe more than
More
that.
than 100.
Yeah? More than 100?
Yeah.
Okay. 200?
Yeah, a lot higher.
A lot higher? Higher than 200?
Yeah. In
You-
the US, obviously.
USA, yeah? Yeah. Very good. Next page, please. Instead of 100, it's 541. And would you say that the United States is a safe society, that there are less crimes? I think there are so many examples, not only the shootings there, but it is, you have full districts of big cities where it's not safe even for the police to come in. I've been a tourist in the USA. I was strictly advised, don't go in there, you're robbed immediately. And, well, this is the problem in the US. If you make a small mistake, if you drink some alcohol and you drive, but you're not loaded, but you have a bit too much, you go into jail. So, maybe for half a year, so you lose your job, etc., etc. This is not the solution, in my view. Drastic consequences of a prison sentence after a lighter crime, yes. Safer world, no, in my opinion. Time for a joke. Very short one, and I can sit with this joke, so don't worry. It is about lawyers' jokes. You might have heard a lawyer joke. And there is a problem with these jokes. Did you know why there is a problem? Well, it's very shortly, please. Yeah. No, it's not giving the answer. It's just a question. The problem of lawyer jokes is that lawyers don't think they are funny jokes, and all non-lawyers, people in society, think they are true jokes. You might have an idea what is meant there. The greedy lawyers who want to have money and betray their clients. But that is not just what I say, it's not correct, because there are many good lawyers, and the role of defense lawyers in our country, in the Netherlands, is important. They have to give information to the prosecutor and the judge about the personal situation of the suspect. And they can speak with the family, with employers, etc., etc. They can form a strategy of the defense line. Maybe not to say, I want to go for acquittal, but maybe to avoid imprisonment, to emphasize the social, personal aspects. And there we have also the role of the probation service, a very important service in the Netherlands, who also collect information about the personal situation of the suspect or defendant, and also give advice to prosecutor and judge how to deal with the case. Please. Reports of the probation service are usually requested by the prosecutor, and the view of the prosecution service is also in the Netherlands, of the JAXA so, that probation adds to a safer society. There has been a scientific survey, a multitudinal survey of many years, that has showed that there is a lower recidivism after alternative sentence. 47% of the people who were imprisoned recidivates within 2 years, and 28% after a community service sentence or another alternative sentence. So that is a difference of almost 20%. And this study was the reason for our Dutch government to decide to have a big budget on probation. Probation service was professionalized, many psychologists, social workers involved, many more than before, and they really invested in the personal information of the defendant, of the suspect. And Dutch judges consider probation reports as useful information. I would say, and I know many colleagues who have said the same, where would I be as a judge without this information? I would be lost. I could not give a tailor-made decision. Because probation officers have much more time than judges to obtain the relevant information about the person, the accused. Judges often have a trial of 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe a bit more, but you cannot expect to have a good interaction then. And the defendant will not speak easily and spontaneously to a judge, but he or she will do to the probation officer. And they have higher expertise because they learned special things for communication and getting out the important information. Also the expectation of recidivism, please. The information in the report which we value very much are these risk factors. What are the risk things like alcohol abuse, social problems, mentality, etc., relational problems, mental disorders, the financial situation. Some crimes are committed because people think it's easy to steal something, and then I have for a few days my financial situation solved. Work situation, that they don't get work. And of course, I've mentioned the alcohol and drugs problem. And also relevant is the attitude of the accused. You mentioned it in your answer. They change. Do they also are they willing to be changed? That's important. Do they see a problem? Do they have a motivation to change? And of course, this risk of reoffending, there are scientific approaches that can place you in a category of very low risk, very high risk. That's also important. Well, my last joke. I already said we have many defendants who are very influenceable. We also have many who are not so intelligent. This was a not very clever thief. He was, I would say, dumb. He had a criminal record of 30 pages, and I think there is no solution to please do the next one. No, go back please. So, by the head, this person was always convicted, 30 times, and now I had a lawyer who said, please, don't say anything. Keep your mouth, because you are maybe not the most intelligent person on earth, and you could contribute to your conviction, so don't say anything. And the judge, who knew the suspect, said, you again? Oh, all your pages, what did you do again? Please give me an answer. I have the right to remain silent, Your Honor. Didn't say anything. The judge tried, and then after a few minutes he said, well, okay, doesn't make sense, you don't want to say anything. I come to my decision. The evidence is very thin. So, and he said it very fast, the judge, I'm going to acquit you. But I say you once, never do this again. Then this not very clever thief looked at the judge and said, I'm sorry, Your Honor, but acquittal, you acquit me. Does that mean the things that are stolen, can I keep them? And what do you think the prosecutor did then, after this remark of the defendant?
Using that remark as an evidence.
For the appeal. But you're right, using it as the evidence, and he appealed. That is also something which is maybe interesting information for Indonesian situation for alternative sanctions, because that is a part we have to see in the coming years. How many appeals will there come from the prosecution service if there is an alternative sanction? Okay, the next one please. The judges have trust in the quality of probation reports, but this has been the process, because the first reports were not so good because, as I said, the probation service had to professionalize. But we had the idea to have liaison judges and liaison prosecutors in all courts, because they had interaction with the probation service, how to ameliorate the reports, also to understand the restraints that are there, to get advice and to have full reports. And there were misunderstandings, and I'll give you a personal example of it. My misunderstanding, as I was a trainee judge, almost a judge, I visited the community service project, and there was a very experienced probation officer, and we spoke about convicted persons with an addiction, a drug addiction, like heroin, cocaine, etc. And I said to the probation officer, well, they won't work here, I think. Oh, they do, he said, they do. And he asked me, how many do you think of the addicts are successful in delivering the community service? They don't interrupt it, they complete the whole service. And I knew that 80% of the whole community service population was successful. But with addicts I thought, well, maybe 20% or 30%, because they are so different people. They don't have a discipline and they come from... He said to me, you're totally wrong, Mr. Training Judge. It is almost the same, it's 75%. Because they are aware of the chance they get to stay out of prison and they want to change their lives. I don't know if after this 30 years, 35 years even, it's the same, but we know that there are many good results with people who have behavior problems or drug addicts problems. So that's important to know. Very shortly to repeat, why a non-custodial sanction and not an imprisonment sanction? Less risk of bad influences in prison. Reducing the number of detained persons also means more time for adequate rehabilitation activities outside of prison. The maintenance of family and community ties and work, of course, in the next time. But a question to you, is that all? There is also the aspect of humane. It's more humane not to lock up a person with no perspective, but are there other reasons you could think of that you should have less prison and more probation? What do you think? Somebody wild guess? I will give you the answer. The answer is the costs. It is so much cheaper to impose a community service sentence and even a conditional sentence with a lot of special conditions involving psychologists, etc. Everything for that is much less. In the next slide, we'll give you some information. The prison costs are much higher. The cost of an imposed community service was, these are old numbers, but they're still adequate, 72 euros a day. 55 euros is 1 million rupiah. And prison costs are, I can give you the answer right away, are 259 euros. So 72, 259. It's almost 25% less if you impose alternative sanctions. But then you should also think these are only the direct costs, because the society costs are the indirect costs. You have to give social security, you have to be integrated, so there are social workers involved. These costs are not valued, they're not assessed, but they are also quite high, so they come extra. So, and that is, you know, the Netherlands are a trade nation. Sometimes people in the bar who want to have the biggest punishment are doubting if they hear how much cheaper it is. Then they say, okay, well maybe some crimes it's better than the very costly prison. Please. Are alternative sanctions in the Netherlands only a success story? No. There is resistance in society, and I think I already said it to you. The reason to have resistance is that it's considered to be a too soft crime. Next page, please. And some politicians want to impress as populists to being tough on crime. But, next place. It's a majority, I'm wrong. It's a minority in society that grumbles and complains about too low, too soft crime. Because alternative sentences are widely accepted, and there we have an advantage related to other countries where it just started, like Indonesia. We had almost more than 50 years ago, 1971, our first community service sentence. This was a courageous judge, because it was not in the law, but this judge found a way to impose that sentence. And 18 years later, it was mentioned as a sanction, official sanction in our criminal code. That's of course good, because then you can develop and you can professionalize the BAPAs, the probation service, etc., etc. And the prosecutors and judges can get used to the advantages of that. Please, next one. Well, this is what I've said, the soft option, but it's important to know, the last part, not only imprisonment means deprivation of liberty. Because if you have to work for 240 hours of community service sentence, that is 8 hours a day, you have to be present 30 days and do the tasks you are giving commands to. And the same counts for the treatment and the geographical conditions and the electronic monitoring we have, ankle brace. This is also deprivation of liberty. You can't just get out of the house, you can't just have work. Please, next one, please. And the good thing is, community service can also have a great impact on the offender, because offenders see their chances. There is no remuneration, but they see, oh, I can do this, I can get a job working technically this or that, I can do that better than I knew. Please, next one. And it's a lot of time, as I already said. If you have a decent job, you have holiday periods, sometimes 20, 25 days a year. You have to spend these days, as long as you cannot work on weekend days. Sometimes probation service does that, especially on Saturday. We have a weekend, Saturday, Sunday. and normally you have to work only Monday until Friday. So the convicted persons want to have the Saturday, but it's not always possible, so they have to offer their holiday period as well. Okay, next one please. Don't forget, it's a strict regime because you get orders from above, from the working masters. If you have to clean up a church in Indonesia, clean up a mosque, masjid, then you get orders where to go, when to go, to work harder, etc. People have to get up early, they work for nothing, they have to pay their own travel costs. So that is to see that it's not just a soft one. It's a really, for many people, a big change of their life. And this is also the factor of the 20% that doesn't complete. For some of them, it's too hard and they quit. They don't show up anymore. Okay. The positive thing is you get into a rhythm of work, you experience your talents, I already said it. It enhances your self-esteem, and it's a new way of life for some of the defenders. In the Netherlands, a lot of mostly lower jobs. We don't have enough employees, but it's known by probation service. So if there is a person who does the community service very well, they are connected to big employers and they can get a job, which they normally wouldn't have got. 80% success, I already said. But what if the sentence is not fulfilled? Then the probation service, who execute the community service sentence, reports this immediately to the prosecutor. And the prosecutor orders then the conversion of the not worked hours into custody. So let's say you had a punishment of 100 hours and you worked only 50, then for the 50 hours not worked, you get the imprisonment sentence which is in line with the 50 and not with the 100. There is a 14 days of appeal to the decision of the prosecutor by the convicted person, and the judge decides. Usually the judge decides in line with the prosecutor because there is no good reason to not fulfill your community service sentence. But there are special situations that there is a miscommunication, there's a medical problem during the work, people didn't show up, but usually they have to go into prison. It's also because we want to show that it's a chance. If you don't take the chance, that you get into prison, that it's not soft punishment, but it's really a threat. Yes. My experience in other countries, especially the countries who are not yet part of the European Union, like Ukraine or Armenia or Bulgaria is the other example they are part, is that some judges at the start are afraid of probation reports because they don't know it. They get a lot of extra information. Prosecutors and judges are everywhere very, very busy, so they don't like to hear that they get more information. And they think that their independence is at stake, which is not the case. But the good side of the information is they have more information for a decision. The information they usually got from the police is very small about the person of the defender, it's more about the evidence. And you can see that as a judge or a prosecutor as well as an advantage. And judges stay independent because they are, of course, not obliged to follow the information. If they see a totally different accused person in the court trial, and if they don't agree with the advice for a certain sanction, they can move on elsewhere. And also, probably prosecutors can reject the advice. It happens sometimes that the probation service in the Netherlands says, please, a community service sentence, and that the prosecutor says, no, this crime is too harsh, I want an imprisonment. And then again, the judge can say imprisonment or still alternative sanction. We, especially in the Court of Appeal, often differ from what the prosecution service has asked in the Court of First Instance. Please. Advantage is tailor-made decisions, tailor-made to the person of the offender, wished not only by judges, also by prosecutors. As said, often imprisonment doesn't reduce crime, only for a few months. And now I don't ask it to you because it's too complicated to give an answer, but I will show you how often alternative sentences are imposed compared to prison sentences in the Netherlands. There is a number of executed sentences 2 years ago, 2023. Then there were 30,000 prison sentences, 14,000 fines, and 35,000 community service sentences. And then supervision, that's very important in the Netherlands, 14,000. That's often for 2 years or even for 3 years by probation service. 1,000 behavior trainings. So if you add these numbers, you see that there are 50,000 alternative sentences and 30,000 prison sentences. And of the 30,000, as said, 74%, so almost 3/4, is less than 3 months. So that is the view of the execution in 2023. Next one, please. Well, you will probably have some questions, and I hope I'll probably have some answers. Maybe it's good before you think about your questions. I mentioned the project, I think, the BAPAS project. If I say BAPAS, you all understand? Yeah? And does anybody know about the law number 1 of 2023? The new criminal code?
Yes.
Yeah? As you might know, in the old criminal code, which is still in force, there is no special article about alternative sentences. There is in the new criminal code. Does anybody of you know when it will get into force?
When?
When?
2026?
Yeah.
Very good, 2026, January, so quite close. That was the reason why this BAPAS project was there, funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands, because the BAPAS of Indonesia asked for assistance and speaking with us, but also with prosecutors in Indonesia and judges, because it's important to have interaction and to speak with each other, also to see where problems could lie. Well, we tried to have, how you call that, I forgot the word, but it's an example of a court session where, let's say a tryout, where the prosecutor can ask for alternative sentence, and the judge can impose or not, and there's a discussion about it. But that was too much asked because it's such a mindset change that it should take some more time. The problem, of course, is that in January 2026, there is no big practice of it because it's only possible if you have some examples in practice and speak with each other and also spread the news within the prosecution service and within the judiciary that there are examples. There is, however, one very recent encouraging decision. I might pronounce it wrongly, but I think in Bengkulu area, Sumatra, you have a town called Curup. Do you know? Surup? Surup or Curup? Curup, okay. And I saw just a few days ago, there is a decision from a female judge with the name Eka, and she has other names. Maybe if you can look it up on the internet, you will see more information. And she imposed a community service sentence of, I think it was 60 hours for an assault. And as far as we know, it is the first decision in Indonesia on an alternative sentence on non-juveniles, because there are some alternative sanctions on juvenile offenders, as I've heard during the BAPAS project. And I don't know where the basis of this penalty is. I don't know if there is already a conviction formally written down with the legal basis, but it might be interesting for you to read it, to look it up. It was on Instagram, and it's maybe already now published on other the media, but that's maybe interesting. I took a lot of your time, I'm sorry. As you might have heard, it's in my heart, so I want to give some examples. If there are questions, I don't know, you want to have a break, or what is best? Continue? For me, a break is not necessary. I have my eye here.
Yeah. I think we can continue with the Q&A session.
Good. Great.
Dank u wel, Pak Nico.
For the thoughtful and insightful presentation. Hearing directly from your experience has helped us a lot to understand that alternative punishment isn't only just a theory. It's a functioning part of a legal system that also centers the human dignity and social impact. And to conclude your presentation, I might say that the Netherlands shows us that when a legal system shifts its focus from punishment to restoration or alternative punishment, the result can be transformative with lower incarceration rates, stronger communities, and better outcomes for victims and offenders alike. Comparatively, in Indonesia, is still on its journey, I guess. While efforts like restorative justice at the community level and rehabilitative programs are emerging, institutional support, legal certainty, and public trust are still evolving within our society in Indonesia. With that context in mind, I would like to open the floor for the audience to ask you several questions. But before that, I would like to invite our lecturers. Several lecturers are joining us in the Zoom now. Maybe Bapak or Ibu in the Zoom, if you would like to give response, you may give your response before the Q&A session.
And silakan, Mia, I forgot to mention that I stopped here my presentation because the mediation would be too long after each other. If there is still some time, I can tell also about mediation, but not now. First floor.
For the Q&A.
Yes, the Q&A. If that ends the session, if that ends the session, it's fine as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Noted.
Good.
Okay, I guess Prof. Marsudi already opened the mic. If you would like to give response, please, Prof. Marsudi, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, moderator. Well, it's an excellent presentation, sir. Straightforward and detailed. Yeah. Actually, I'm not. My background is not criminal law, but international law. But I'm still interested with your statement about the composition and percentage of the number of judges compared to the populations. In the Netherlands has 7,500 judges with a population of only 18 million. And compared to Indonesia, which only has 8,711 judges with a population of around 275 million. Yeah, it's and you said, yeah, the number of judges in your country is still lacking. Yeah. What about Indonesia with such huge populations and only 8,711 judges? With the very small numbers of judges, it's well, this is actually popular news, yeah, in the public media, yeah, that the government will increase salaries, yeah, for judges, and the salary increase around uh, 280% for the current salaries of judge. So, do you think it is solutions to the poor justice system in Indonesia? Thank you.
Terima kasih Pak Marsudi, and first of all for your kind words. It has been a pleasure to give the presentation. Your question about the numbers of judges, it's a problem in every country. All judges and all prosecutors complain about the workload, but it's hard to compare numbers because of the 2,075 million orang in Indonesia, there will be many who won't go to court in their whole life. And it's hard to see how many, but I would say in the Netherlands, not only for criminal cases, but also for civil cases or tax cases, I think the percentage of the population will be much higher. And then we have the problem maybe also being a trade country with many trade conflicts with other countries. Indonesia has of course also these conflicts, but maybe the small country Negeri Belanda, where we all have to speak at least English to survive also, because we need the big world around us. That's also a factor. And maybe I forget some other factors, but it's hard to compare. I can say from my personal experience that my wife was very happy as I more or less retired, because I worked between 60 and 70 hours a week, each week. That is not healthy. I know many examples of judges who are about my age who had to stop because they were ill, etc., because of the workload. I don't know how the workload in Indonesia is, but I've spoken with some judges and they all said they have a lot to do. So it's dangerous, and I think the salary raising is a good thing to think of. It needs, of course, political support. I can give you one example of a country where there was corruption in the judiciary. It was Turkey. And there they raised the salaries over 40%. And then the corruption problem was for a big part gone, because people said, now I don't need to get other incomes. If the salary stays much too low, then there are, of course, many good judges, but there are always people in every population of work who cannot deal with the luxury. So, yeah, that happens. That one should be honest on that. But it requires that the government says this is a priority. And I cannot oversee the Indonesian situation, but I see, of course, that you try to make a new capital in Kalimantan, that there are big, I've seen, I was happy to be part of the good connections, all the toll roads, etc. There are the free meals for children. I didn't hear about the justice, but maybe it's my lack of knowledge. But thank you very much for your interesting question, Dr. Suri. And I know that you are specialized in many more complex areas of the law, like the environmental law and constitutional law. I can learn a lot from you. I'm happy that you had the question not on these parts of the law. Terima kasih.
Thank you. Second question, sir, about alternative sanctions. Yeah. What are the qualifications for convicts who can be given alternative sanctions? And then what kind of community service is good in a prison system that can be accepted by the community? Thank you.
Yeah, very concrete and good question. Terima kasih. What we often do is having work outside where it's visible, for instance, chopping wood, cleaning up the streets. The example I just mentioned of Churuk is the judge said you have to clean the masjid. But also in the Netherlands we have not only cleaning, but we also have, for instance, helping in an elderly home. Sometimes if people have caused a big road accident where people got invalid, they are asked to work in a rehabilitation for the center for people so they can see what they've done and to see how much these people are a victim and have to rehabilitate for a longer time. But that is tailor-made, that's not always easy to get, but the examples I just gave are the main ones. And there is one, thinking about your question, one nice example of the country Croatia in the EU. There was a big problem to convince society that it was a punishment and it was good to have the payback to society. But then there were the inundations, the big streams of water. It was a huge country problem. And then the probation service said we can let our convicted persons work there. And then society said, wow, this is very good, because without this help, we wouldn't have these results. So that is important to have an open mind to society, what they could think, that they can be happy with the results. If that is an answer to your question, Dr. Suri.
Okay, thank you.
Sama-sama.
Thank you so much, Prof. Marsudi, for the questions. But now I will move to our audience in the room. So if you guys have questions, please raise your hands, and I will invite you to speak. And of course, for our audience online via Zoom as well, please type your questions in the live chat or in the Zoom chat. Our team is collecting them, and I will be selecting a view to us directly to Pak Nico.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, sir. My name is Dini. I want to ask about alternative punishment. So in Indonesia, although probation exists, it's often limited in scope, like under resources and lacks strong community engagement. So it resulting in relatively low public confidence and effectiveness. In contrast, like you said before, the Netherlands government allocates a substantial budget to probation, right? And so in your view, does this investment translate effectively into achieving rehabilitative and reintegrative goals? Particularly, how do Netherlands courts assess the appropriateness of probation over custodial sentencing in practice? Thank you.
Thank you. You mean the courts after the conviction?
Yeah.
Is there any feedback to the courts? You mean?
Yeah.
Okay, because if I as a judge have convicted a person and there is no new crime later on, I won't see that person. We have to get our information about the numbers. I also mentioned that there is within 2 years 28% less recidivism and after a community service sentence and 47 after an imprisonment sentence. So that is the information we only have as judges. What we do try is there where parts of the population think it's not an appropriate punishment, to show that we see the advantages. But not the judges so much, they also do it, like me today, but it's the prosecutors, because they have to sometimes, if politicians who want to impress to be tough on crime, they attack the prosecutors who ask alternative sentences, then they say, well, there are many advantages, as I mentioned, and you should be aware of the advantages as well. And we have the head of the probation service, who was a public prosecutor for many years. He's now 6 years head of the probation service. And he's very active on social media. And maybe if you're interested, his last name is Bak, B-A-C. His first name is Johan. And he was also involved in the dapat project. And he's very active on social media, but also in his former profession, the Jackson, to give the recent information to say why it's important to impose alternative sanctions where it is possible, of course. I missed a bit of your question in the first part. Is it a complete answer to your question?
Yeah, it's complete the question. Okay.
Terima
Thank
kasih.
you. Terima kasih.
And your neighbor next to you already raised their hand. Do you have a question?
I have several questions and comments actually.
Okay. Please start with the comments, because that can give some idea about the questions.
Yep. I'm actually not having a background of criminal law. My background is employment law.
Uh-huh.
Yep. But currently I'm a student of photography school, so it's a community based.
Okay.
I'm kind of interested to documentary photography, and this topic is quite interesting because of a best friend of mine. His father was convicted for corruption, and she told me that what you were saying, that prison is the university of crimes, especially in Indonesia.
Uh-huh.
So I'm so invested for the topic that the convicted not really changed, in my opinion, in Indonesia. So the imprisonment does not help them to reintegrate to the society, do not really help them how to get back on their foot in Indonesia, how to cut the cycles of the crimes. Because I also interviewed several employers, and they do not have any intentions to hire an ex-offenders.
Yeah, I understand. It's a nice example. Yeah.
Yeah. Like even I told them that even though they are quite trained in the prison, like several projects of bapas, like they are equipped with several soft skills, but no, they would not hire an ex-thief, for instance. So this topic it is really interesting how to make these ex-offenders ready to integrate to the society, how to make them get a job.
Yeah.
And okay, that's the comment.
If I may interrupt you very shortly, because now I think of the word I just couldn't get, the pilot, that's the word. We said for this reason, we expect that parts of society will not accept alternative sentences, but a pilot should begin with a small crime. For instance, shoplifting, a thief in a shop who doesn't get out because he's caught before, so there is nothing stolen, but of course you have to react. Then many people would say, well, imprisonment, that's not necessary, it could be something else. So it's important to find a very small crime to start with. And that is exactly the problem, not only in Indonesia, but also in other countries where it starts. You have to find the good examples to convince society.
Yeah.
Now your next comment or question, please.
Okay. In one of your slides, judges in Netherlands has a huge freedom of choice in imposing penalties. So the judges in the Netherlands are not relying on the previous verdicts.
No, true. Because a previous verdict can be of a higher crime, and then there comes a smaller crime, so you're not obliged to give a higher punishment. But we do take into account that persons have committed crimes before or not. If not, we try to, if possible, with the severity of the crime, impose only alternative sanctions. If it is the third crime and there was already an alternative sanction before, it could mean we don't do it. So the crime record plays a role.
How about the case that they're doing, the crimes that they are committed are actually the same with the previous verdict? Does that influence the?
Yeah. Then there is true recidivism. Let's say if you just destroy something in the street, that is another crime than taking away things from a shop. So then there is no true recidivism. But if you have the first shoplifting and then the second, then also prosecutors ask a higher punishment and judges impose it, because we have our sentencing guidelines. Let's say first shoplifting, 20 hours of community service, second one, 80 or more. And we abide to that unless we see personal circumstances that make reason to give another sentence. So that's important for us to know what is the true recidivism.
Well, the government needs to learn a lot. The next question.
Please?
About some offenders that cannot be rehabilitated.
Yeah.
How about the rapists?
How about you?
Rapists?
Sorry.
Can you elaborate more about that?
The sexual assault.
Oh, okay, yeah. Of course, there is also a huge part who cannot be rehabilitated because of their sexual deviances in their head. But we always try, if it's not the worst crime committed, to sentence with special conditions, because we do see the advantages of that treatments can help. It's very complicated to explain that to you, but we have another part of our criminal law system which can mean that some sexual offenders can be locked up for life because they are not in a prison, but in an institute where there is also a prison-like situation where they are only treated. And if the psychiatrist and psychologist thinks that there is no change behavior, they can't come out. So this is a special part. I don't want to speak about it because it's too complicated, but that is a possibility to punish the real sexual offenders who won't change their lives. But in many cases, it doesn't start with rape. It starts with something lighter, and then we see if it's adequate to impose an alternative sentence. Yeah.
Perhaps the last comment.
And maybe later on, if other ones have,
Yeah.
please.
You explained that the sanction of social services are not really good for the image of the public. And from that churu, we read that the Judge Eka was given a backlash from the society because it was a soft punishment.
From society, you said?
Yeah. Yeah, for cleaning mosque.
Yeah.
They think, the society thinks that it is quite soft and not as severe as the victim, because the victim is paralyzed, and therefore the social services punishment, Indonesian society still thinks that it is not appropriate to be applied in Indonesia.
It's nice that you mentioned this because we have a chat group of Dutch probation service officers and the Jaksa and myself, and the Dutch Jaksa said 60 hours assault and paralyzed should be at least 100. But we don't know the person of the perpetrator, because assuming that the conviction is adequate because the crime is committed, it could be a person of a very young age could be a person of a very simple mind, not involved in kicking, but just being around, forming the majority around a person, and that makes sense, of course, to deviate. The person who really kicks with the feet into the face should deserve much more, probably imprisonment. But we don't know this very little information about Chuluk. We don't know what exactly the role was. So it's hard to jump into conclusions. But what is good, also a good part of your question, is the reaction of society. Society doesn't know more about this crime than I know. I only know from Instagram, which is like this. But often they react because of getting mad, thinking about the paralyzed victim. That is important, not only for the judge, but first the judge to explain why she imposes an alternative sanction and not an imprisonment sentence. And if the JAXA doesn't appeal, it's also a task for the JAXA to say, well, in this special case, it's adequate. Shouldn't be more than this. Maybe there is already an appeal because this is so new and it's a courageous judge, but it can be appealed by the Court of Appeal, of course. It can be squashed, this decision. And more or less, I expect with the paralyzed victim, regardless of the special role of the perpetrator, that the JAXA for society will appeal. And then there is a new situation, and we'll have to see. Your question is good also because it shows that it's important to make society more aware, to give publicity. If it's just the decision of the lady judge and then the appeal of the JAXA, it's not interesting to raise awareness about the advantages of alternative sentences. So that is especially, I would say, the task of the JAXA and of the papas to give that information. And of course they have to get used to their own interaction because they did not until now cooperate a lot because there were no alternative sanctions. So this is a growing process, like it was in the Netherlands. We needed many years to have an easy contact and to be spontaneous in your reactions and your advice.
Hartelijk bedankt.
Graag gedaan.
Very good, Dutch.
Very good. With a good.
I mentioned these are such important question and engagement being raised, but we also have several questions in the Zoom chat.
Good.
The question raised from Mbak Maria Ulfa. She asked 3 questions,
Okay.
but I will read it for you one by one, and you can respond it one by one as well.
It's good that you take into account my age.
Well, okay. So the first question from Mbak Maria Ulfa is, what form of supervisory punishment is effective in the Netherlands? Are there any suggestions for the situation in Indonesia, which is vast and has few relevant officers in terms of the form of supervisory punishment that could be successfully implemented in Indonesia?
Yeah.
Good
question, Maria Ulfa. Thank you. Let me first say I am a judge, so I don't know exactly what happens in the supervision, because we trust the probation service quality so much that we don't say exactly what has to happen in the interaction. We just impose supervision. Like the community service, we don't say you have to clean up the streets. We leave that to the probation service. What is usual for supervision is that the probation service decides on how often convicted person has to come to the probation service. But also vice versa. It's also important information for a probation officer to come to the house of the perpetrator to see how she or he lives, if there are tensions, if there are problems with the financial situation. So there is both visiting the house and both we have occasion to, as a perpetrator, come to the probation service. And then they speak about, openly, they try to speak about what are your problems now? Do you already have work? Only part-time? Okay. Do you have financial problems? You have an aggression problem? When is the training? I can inform the trainer if you come regularly or not. So there is a kind of checking interaction between the both. And how it's exactly done, that's the expertise of the probation officer. But I think that's already, and Bapas in Indonesia already during the project got advice from Bapas Rwanda how to do so. But of course, Bapas Indonesia has to see the cultural context, because what we do in the Netherlands cannot be copied for Indonesia. And that is what we always said. It's just an example. But in Ukraine, they do it differently than in the Netherlands, and also in Indonesia it will be done differently. But we present examples, and you can choose yourself what you think is best.
So adoption is not that easy, I guess, because we need to checking on our society at large as well.
Yeah, and trial and error. Mm-hmm. You can try something, but you notice that there are some disadvantages, then you have to retry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the second question is, there is a condition for the defendant to agree to the social work sentence. Is there a defendant who refuses the social work sentences while the source is carrying out his professions? What is the solution if the defendant refuses? Is it to prison or other criminal options that the judge could give?
Yeah. As it started in 1989 with the new law, it was necessary that the judge asked during trial, if you would be convicted, do you agree or not? And if there was no agreement, then it was seen as forced labor, and at that time they said, okay, then the judge has to impose something else. Usually it was then prison, because the fine is seen as a lower sentence than community service sentence. That changed in a new law more than 10 years later, and now we are not obliged to ask, but we do so if there is a trial where we have the contact with the then suspect, the then accused. It is because if they say, well, no, I won't work, then the chance is not so big that we impose all the duties to the Bapas. And but there are trials where the defendant is not present, and you can't ask. If there's not a lawyer, you can't ask the lawyer as well. And then we feel free to impose the community service sentence, because we know if they don't show up, they usually don't show up the first time already, then the probation service informs the prosecutor, and the prosecutor, as I explained, arranges that there is an imprisonment sentence by the judge. And then we say it's easier than ask, and then we get a lot of information, disinformation during the trial. You can better impose the community service sentence. It's a chance, and if I impose 100 hours of community service sentence, then it's 50 days of imprisonment instead of that. It is in the sentence, so it's for the convicted person, it's clear what the consequences are.
I hope the answer from Pak Nico can respond to your question about Maria Ulfa. And I will read the last question from her. So she is interested in asking about criminals with mental disorder in the Netherlands. Has the source ever met a defendant like this? Then is the settlement in court like a criminal case with a normal defendant? Are there any challenges to the situation of the perpetrator?
Yeah. Mental disorders, there are quite some. especially for the bigger crimes, because it often leads to aggression or to sexual behavior which is not appropriate. I cannot say in numbers, but I would say every 2 months there is a case that a judge has to deal with people with mental disorder. Part of them are so much disturbed in their mind that for them counts what I just explained, the special traject of not a real prison, but like a prison with treatment. And if they are really mad, you cannot impose a prison sentence because then you have no culpability. Then you only get what is called TBS. That means that you are given to the government and the government decides what happens in the clinic. So this is a very small part. Usually there is some possibility to say you are accountable, you knew what you did, but you have a mental disorder. That is, I think, an answer to the question.
Thank you so much, Mbak Maria Ulfa, with your question. And Prof. Marsudi said that he need to leave early, and he said goodbye to you.
Terima kasih, Pak Marsudi. It was a real pleasure having met you.
Yeah. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Terima kasih.
Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Terima kasih, Prof.
Yeah.
Terima kasih juga kepada Mbak Maria Ulfa atas pertanyaannya. Semoga penjelasan dari Pak Niko bisa menjawab pertanyaan-pertanyaan yang sudah diajukan. And we have 15 minutes remaining. Is there any last question from our audience in the room? Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you, sir. My name is Afani Fajia, and I am an undergraduate law student at Keadilan University. So what I want to ask to you is actually not the alternative punishment, but about the alternative resolutions. Because like in my opinion, when we develop the alternative resolutions, for example, like restorative justice in Indonesia, it can actually like indirectly reduce the number of criminals that will be in prisons, right? So my question in here is, will be two. The first one, and both is about the development of alternative resolutions in Netherlands. So the first one is about transaksi. So like a few months ago, I read some article about transaksi, and I think that is the unique mechanism. Why? Because like I noticed, like at the end of the cases, both criminals and the prosecutors didn't need any judge decisions or like court decisions to final their agreements. Like for example, when criminals agree to solve it outside the court, then yeah, it's just like between the criminals and the prosecutors, but without any decisions from the judge or the court itself. So my question in here is like, does Netherlands have any alternative resolutions mechanism that use the judge or like court decisions as their tools to give a legal certainty for the criminals itself? Yeah, that's my first question.
And which kind of petty crimes you are thinking about then?
I'm sorry?
Which kind of petty crimes you are thinking about then? Because for a severe crime, there will be no transaction outside of the court.
I think for the law classifications of the crime, I mean, it's like maybe like a tax crime. Yeah.
Sorry,
Tax crime.
tax crime. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, we do have transacties. I don't know if what you have read the same is that I have in mind, but transacties are imposed by the public prosecutor, fines, but if I don't agree as a suspect, I can go to the judge to get it quashed.
Oh.
So still, even if I accept it, the JAXA, the public prosecutor, is involved. That is the transaction in the Netherlands, or by the police. If I drive on the wrong side of the road without necessity, then the police can say you have to pay, let's say, 2 million rupiah. If I accept it, I pay, or I pay later by bank, and there is no case for the JAXA and for the for the court. That is the transaction we know in the Netherlands. You also asked generally about other ways of solving conflicts that could have gone otherwise to the judge. Yes, that was in fact, maybe I can extend a bit on that. My second part of today was not only on the alternative sentences, but also on the mediation in criminal cases. And maybe it's good, it will takes a bit longer, but I'll try to make it very short. There is in our criminal procedure code special provision that says that the prosecutor should try to get the accused, the suspect in that case, not accused, the suspect and the victim together, if they both want to do so. That is what we call mediation in criminal cases. And then they can speak with each other. I made some notes because I'm not there at that moment. There is no judge present, there is no prosecutor present, but the prosecutor has first to say it's good or not. So, then if the victim says, I don't want, then there is no chat, there is no meeting. And the same counts for the accused, the suspect. But even if you as a victim go to the police and making a declaration on what has overcome you, then the police has to say, you could speak with the suspect if you like. They have to encourage that more or less so. Not too much, because if the victim says, no, I don't want to, they accept it, they respect it. If such a situation occurs that both the suspect and the victim say, we want to do so, the practice in the Netherlands is very positive, because this is an interaction they don't disagree with, that can bring much more talk and understanding than during the trial, because the trial, the communication is between judge and jaksa and accused, and there is some possibility for the victim, but not to interact freely with the whole setting is not good for that. So the mediation has good results. There is a bureau of mediation in every court, and if they get the message that mediation is wished, then they promote it. And they even, for free, they say, we have 2 professional mediators who will guide you. So there's not locking up of the victim and the suspect, no. There is a session, informal session, with 2 mediators who are professional mediators. And they speak about many things, like emotions, consequences of the crime committed. It, of course, demands that the suspect admits his or her role. If they say, yeah, I'm not guilty, then it doesn't have any chance. So there's already a filter for that. And there can be excuses. The suspect can make excuses, and can say, I'm ready to pay the damages you have had. And that is why the professional mediators are there, because they know exactly in written agreements, okay, the damage is 10 million rupiah, okay, you are able to pay, okay, you sign both, and you make a written agreement. So this is very successful, and the politicians have seen this as so successful that they prolonged the subsidizing of mediation in criminal cases for a few years, because they see the advantage you mentioned, that there is no trial necessary with all the costs, etc., etc. Yes?
Follow-up question. What is the name of the mechanism? Is this like the mediation for criminal, or like, are there any other name for those mechanisms that you have mentioned before about the mediation?
What I just described is named mediation in criminal cases.
Oh, mediations in
And it's still the prosecutor who is the core person. If she or he says no mediation, because I want to get this suspect in court, making or her accused get him to court, then it's still possible for the victim says, yeah, but I want to see him, I want to have a talk, I want to share my emotions, because I am afraid for the court session that's still possible, but it's possible that the prosecutor then says, I won't take the result into account because I think the crime is so severe, I won't ask for a lower crime. The judge can do. And the law is that the judge and prosecutor can see that there is a result and that they take that into account. It's no prescription. It's not that they have to ask or impose a lower sentence, but it's a sort of stimulation to say, well, please take it as a serious part of your decision. Yeah.
Okay, then moving on to my second question, and this is my last question, related again to the development of alternative resolutions in Netherlands. So, like, once I have read some articles, I mean, like some thesis from University of Netherlands about the alternative resolutions called strafbeschikking, perhaps. Strafbeschikking.
Beschikking, yeah,
Yeah.
I understand. Okay.
Yeah, and from that I noticed that this mechanism is give the main responsibility to the prosecutor itself, not to the judge, but to the prosecutors. And I think this is unique because, like in Indonesia, we still use judge as their main court decisions, right, to give legal justice for the criminals. So my question in here is like, what and how is the development of the mechanism itself, like the strafbeschikking? Yeah, I think that's it. That's my question.
Your question is clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
As the judges were also too few and there were big delays, then government says for certain crimes where there is a maximum punishment only as a community service sentence, not as an imprisonment, we want to give the prosecutor the possibility to impose this strafbeschikking, this decision. For instance, the maximum I as a judge can give for a community service sentence is 240 hours. Like in the new law of Indonesia, it's also 240. The jaksa in the Netherlands can, with the strafbeschikking, only impose the half of it, 120. But if the suspect does not agree, the suspect can go to court. In practice, we have, that is very complicated to explain in a few minutes, but we have a system that is called ZSM, zo spoedig mogelijk. That means that directly after the crime, person arrested comes to the police station, the jaksa comes, the probation comes, and the lawyer of the person comes, and they decide on what has to be done. And it can be a subpoena to go to court, but in many cases the jaksa tries to say, well, I am happy if you work for 120 hours community service, and then the suspect can say, well, it's too much, I don't do it, I go to court, or I agree. In many cases they agree because they don't like to go to court, and they don't know which judge they will get and how it's then seen. So they can oversee 120 or 60 hours of work, and they say agree. This is started with the demand that the prosecutor was very experienced. There are a lot of experience, so she or he would be a more magistrate weighing all situations, not a young prosecutor who wants to punish and so on. The sad thing is that later on, after 10 years, the younger prosecutors got this role because the older prosecutors had done it and they found other things more interesting also for their career. And there has been a big report of the Procurator General in the Netherlands, the head of the jaksa. They admitted that there was not enough expertise, not enough expertise, as I said, that should be changed. And the other negative thing where judges complain about is that in all those cases that the suspect doesn't accept and wants to go to court, 25%, so a quarter, leads to acquittal. So the judge says there is no evidence. If they had agreed with the strafbeschikking, they would have worked maybe in a case that there was no evidence. So that is the reason why the jaksa has to be very experienced and has to really test if it's a case they also win in court. Yeah?
Yeah.
Maybe other questions.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you so much for the response, sir. I guess this is the end of our session. We already engaged into 2 hours, I guess.
Yeah.
And very interactive discussion. I love it, and I hope you guys love it as well. And as we approach the end of our session, I want to thank all of you guys, our participants here in the room, and also everyone in the Zoom, and our audience who's joining us via YouTube channel for your time, presence, and thoughtful questions. Thank you so much. You made our discussion alive. And most of all, we extend our deepest gratitude to Pak Nico. Thank you so much for his generosity in sharing his expertise and experiences with us today. And today's our discussions has reminded us that justice doesn't have to end with a prison sentence. Justice can also be transformative when it is centered on accountability and community reintegration. We hope these conversations inspires reflections on how we can shape a more restorative and socially just legal system here in Indonesia. Please stay tuned for our future events through our YouTube and Instagram and other social media of LSJ. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the day.
May I say a last word
Yeah.
for that? Normally the accused gets the last word, now the judge gets it.
For sure.
Thank you so much for all your good questions. They were all very good. And please keep in mind, you are the young generation. Within a few years, you will be in charge of things, and you can also show to your family and your friends that there are other solutions than you thought. So I hope to have inspired you a little bit. And I was very, very happy with the quality of your questions. So terima kasih banyak. And Nia, thank you so much for the very kind way to moderate this. And Mark for the organization. And Pakker Lemon will... he's still there. My compliments. Thank you again for getting up so early in the Netherlands. And it was a real pleasure. I hope to meet in Leiden or elsewhere with you, and enjoy your stay in Leiden.
Okay, that will be great for cup of coffee meeting here.
Very good.
Okay, thank you, Pak Nicole.
Terima kasih, Mas Erlangga.
Ya, sama-sama. Terima kasih semuanya ya.
Okay.
So it's recorded for YouTube, you said? Okay, good.
So we can rewatch it via our YouTube channel here.
Can you send me the link later on?
Yeah, of course. I would love to send you via email.
We can take a picture.
Recording stopped.
Congratulations.